Hi, my name is Rueben Berg. I'm the chair of the WFDF Ultimate Rules Subcommittee, and today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the timings that we have in play at WFDF Championship events. So there are important timings that we use as part of WFDF Championship events, and sometimes when people turn up to these events, it's the first time they've had exposure to these timings. So I thought I'd talk you through a bit more about some of these timings so you're a bit more prepared when you go to these events and a bit more aware of what's going on. Now, the best way to find out about these timings is to actually have a look in the rules. As with most things, that's the best place to find information. And these rules are specifically contained in section A5 of the appendix. So if you want more detail about what I'm talking about today, that's the best place to go. We also have produced a bit of a summary document which highlights some of the key things to be aware of, and we'll include that into the description below. So you might find that useful to print out and have with you at trainings. But as always, the best place is to have a look in the appendix. What I thought I'd talk to you about though here today are some of those key things. And the first thing to be really mindful of is the timings between points. So at WFDF Championship events, there is a time limit between when one point finishes and when the next point is supposed to start. And we have a series of whistles to help teams understand what's going on and to help make sure that they can follow those rules. So what happens is that after a goal has been scored, there'll be someone with a stopwatch who's going to start timing. So that timer starts once the goal has been scored, or pretty much once the teams have signalled that a goal has been scored. And there are different timings at play that come after that. So if you're playing a mixed game and you're using the ratio rule B, there will be a whistle at 15 seconds after that goal's been scored. And that's when the relevant team has to indicate what gender they're going to be using. So that has to be done before that 15-second whistle. If you hear that 15-second whistle and you haven't done it, that's the prompt to start doing that hand signal straight away. The next whistle that's going to come in is one whistle at 45 seconds. Now this is a warning for the offense to make them aware that they only have 15 seconds to be ready for the pull. And so once you hear that whistle at 45 seconds, it's pretty much the signal for anyone who's not playing that point to get off the field. Now's the time to get off the field. You've heard that one whistle at 45 seconds, start moving off the field. Because at 60 seconds, there's going to be a whistle coming with two whistles. And at that point, you have to have only the 7 offensive players on the field. They each have to have their foot on the line, and they have to have, one of them has to have their hand up in the air. So that's what has to happen at 60 seconds. Now, they shouldn't put their hand up until they've met all that criteria. So everyone else is off the field. They don't have the coach on the field, no other players, and everyone is standing with their foot on the line. That's when you should put your hand up, and you want to do that before the 2 whistles at 60 seconds. After that, the defense has a further 15 seconds to be able to get the pull off. And so if the offense met that 60-second criteria, it's going to be at 75 seconds. There's going to be 3 whistles to say, now's the time when the pull should have gone up. And if the offense actually takes longer than that 60 seconds to put their hand up legally, then it's going to be 15 seconds from when that happens. So it's 15 seconds after the offense is ready, or 75 seconds, whichever is longer. So for the defense, when they hear those 2 whistles, they want to be looking up, they want to see the offense is ready, they want to start making sure all their teammates get off the field, their coaches are off, their other players are off, the defense is ready, and they're going to go and get that pull off before the 3 whistles. So that's really, really important. When we talk about multiple whistles, it's good to know that that there are penalties, and that the penalty doesn't actually apply until the start of the last whistle. So if you're on defense and you hear the first whistle of those 3, then you hear the second one. If you get it off before the start of that third one, you're fine. You haven't breached any rules. So once you hear the start of those series of 3, try and get it off, because it's not until the third one that's when you've actually made a breach. So as I said, there are some penalties that apply. I'm not going to talk to you about those details here. Have a look in the appendix, section A5. That's where to find those things. But really, we don't want teams to have to use these penalties. We just want teams to actually comply and encourage one another to apply to those timings, because it's a really key thing to be doing at these World Championships events. Now, there are other timings that apply, and that's to timeouts. So timeouts, you have 75 seconds for a timeout. And if you're calling that timeout in between points, that adds 75 seconds to the 75 seconds that you usually have between points. It doesn't actually matter when you call that timeout. It doesn't give you extra time to wait and call it later on. So it's not some sneaky thing to wait until you're just about ready to put your hand up and then call a timeout and think, well, I'm going to get extra time. You're not getting any extra time. It only adds 75 seconds to the total. Doesn't matter when you call it. Now, if you're calling a timeout during play, there are similar whistles that come into effect for that 75 seconds. And so if you hear the 2 whistles, that's a reminder that the offense now needs to be ready. So they have to actually be still If you hear those 2 whistles, that's time to stop moving, be ready to get the disc into play. The defense then has that 15 seconds to try and set up, or the 75 seconds if the offense was ready by that 60 seconds. So really be aware, those are the sorts of timings that we have in place there for timeouts during play. Best way to look things up though, in the appendix. There are penalties for those things, but again, just try and encourage teams to comply. There are also timings that apply to turnovers. So if there's been a turnover, there are time limits at play for that. And if the turnover is in the central zone, the offense has 10 seconds to put the disc into play. If the turnover and the disc is located in the end zone or out of bounds, the offense has 20 seconds to put the disc into play. Now those time limits apply whether or not the other team cares about them or not. So if you're on offense, you are still obliged to put the disc into play within those 10 seconds or within those 20 seconds. So if there's been a big huck and it's turned over down the other end of the field, and your handler decides, well, I'm just going to walk all the way from one end to the other to give everyone a chance to catch a breath, that's actually not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to hustle, get down there, within 10 seconds, if the disc is in the central zone, put that disc into play. Now, the defense can remind teams of this. They can remind them that they have these obligations, and they can start what we call a pre-stall. And if they do start that pre-stall, once they've finished it, they can actually start the stall count if the offense hasn't started play already. Again, look up the rules in the appendix to find the exact details of that. It's more, though, about encouraging teams to not just stand around and faff. Let's try and get play started. That's what we want to see. We want to see people playing. We don't want to see people standing around. Sometimes if you've got game advisors, they will assist teams in being aware of what those timings are. So they might do some chopping of their arms. That doesn't mean that once they finish chopping their arms that the team can start stalling. The defense still has to make their own calls if they want to be enforcing those timings. Those choppings is still just a reminder for the offense to say, hey, you have to meet these 10 or 20 seconds. And so that's a really important thing to understand. There is also, in terms of recognising we don't just want to see people standing around, we want to see people play, there are time limits in place for discussions. So if you're trying to resolve a call, you have 45 seconds to resolve that call. And so after those 45 seconds, there will be 3 whistles that are blown. And that means that play is to be treated as contested. There's no more discussion. The rules say after 45 seconds, if it's not resolved, treat it as contested. Now, if you're involved in a game where there are significant language barriers between the teams and you're going to need an interpreter to come in and help out, we do allow an extra 15 seconds to have those sorts of conversations. But so really be aware, 45 seconds or that minute, you hear those 3 whistles, that's it, that's the finish, it's contested. Send the disc back, let's get started playing. I really do encourage teams to be aware of these timings and actually use them in their practice. Make sure it's not the first time you're ever using them when you rock up to Worlds. Try and practice them at your training, get familiar with them, get comfortable with them, and that'll make the playing experience much better for everyone. Thank you.